All right, today we're going to talk about cultivating your mental well-being. And when we think about cultivating our mental well-being, we really want to talk about what that means and create some awareness around mental health. So my name is Abby Horton. I am a registered nurse. I teach at the Capstone College of Nursing here at UA. I'm also a wellness ambassador for the Honors College. I am a well-being middle class educator, so that's why we're here today. And I also am a certified health and life coach. My background is in med-surg nursing, but most recently I've been doing mental health nursing, and it is a huge passion project for me because creating awareness around good mental health practices and ending the stigma around mental health is something that I really want to be a part of my life work. And so I hope that this is helpful for y'all, but please feel free to put questions or comments in the chat as we go through. My contact information is here. It's Abby.Horton at ua.edu. And if at any point you have questions and you don't have time to answer today, or you need a more specific answer or private answer, please feel free to reach out. Miranda is on the call today. She is helping out with the chat and resources. So she is actually going to share this presentation with y'all, and she'll put that in the chat. So be sure to grab it if that's something you would like. All right, so most of my presentations start out with control what you can control. So if we have some repeat, friends on my call today, I always like to say this first because I think so often we get into this habit or this mindset of feeling like we're out of control. And we have a lot of Wellbama webinars on overcoming overwhelm and managing stress and thinking about habit change. But really, all of those topics, even the things that are more about physical health, like cardiovascular disease, it really all starts with mindset. So I want y'all to think about what you can control. And our goal in this first image here, it says it's not to get rid of all of our negative thoughts or feelings. It's impossible. The goal is to change our response to them. And that's what I want you to think about as we move through this presentation. We often talk about stress as if we shouldn't have any. We talk about, quote unquote, negative emotions or feelings as if we shouldn't feel or think those things. And we're not about toxic positivity here. We really want to be real and authentic and address the fact that life sometimes is overwhelming and life sometimes is hard, but we can control our mindset and our response to those stressors. And I'm excited to be able to talk y'all through that today. So don't worry about what you can't control. Things that you can control are things like this third graphic, your attitude and your action and your effort. Things that you follow, things that you unfollow, how you speak to yourself, how you speak to others, the personal boundaries that you set, all of those types of things. What you consume, that's not just what you consume in terms of food, but what do you consume in terms of your social media and your entertainment. So everything that we are exposed to in our environment is a form of consumption. And so we want to really think about that as well. And then the last image, I am a huge fan of Venn diagrams, and I love it because it really helps us focus our attention. So there are things that matter and there are things that we can control. And where those two things overlap in this Venn diagram is where we should focus our time and attention and our effort. And so there are certainly things that matter that are out of our control, and there are things that we can control that in the grand scheme of things don't really matter. And so we don't want to focus on those things individually. We want to focus on where that overlap is and how we can best use our time and our resources, because sometimes that's limited. So when to seek help, of course, there are lots of reasons to seek help beyond just what I've listed here. But if you're not feeling like yourself, if you're feeling sad or angry or overwhelmed, if you're using unhealthy coping mechanisms, if you're grieving, if you've experienced a trauma or major life event, or if just, the things that you typically do to get out of that feeling of feeling stuck and overwhelmed doesn't work for you, then you may want to seek some professional help. And certainly there are times where we all need someone to be able to walk alongside us as we're going through things. We're not going to talk a lot about COVID-19 because I think that's just so much a part of our everyday. It's the thing that's in our background. that we're constantly, really needing to address or respond to. But in the context of COVID-19, I think it's particularly important to realize that we are going through a collective traumatic experience, and we're all being impacted directly or indirectly. And so this truly is an unprecedented time, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. And then how to seek help. There are so many resources in the West Alabama community and here on campus. So I just went ahead and highlighted the American Behavioral Health because that's how we can access counseling through our employee benefits. But just know that there are many, many more resources. And if you have any difficulty locating those, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to connect you to those. All right. So I love telling people when I talk about health and wellness that health is not simply the absence of disease. So the World Health Organization, as far back as 1940, had this as part of their definition of health. And I love it because I think we sometimes think health is just being a healthy weight, or having a good BMI score, or it's not having a diagnosis or a prescription. But health is so much more than that, particularly when we think about mental health. With mental health, we, certainly have a lot of stigma around that. We don't often say that we're going to see a counselor, but we would tell someone that we're going to see a personal trainer. And so when we get to the point where we're as comfortable saying that we went to see a counselor yesterday as we would be to say we went and saw our personal trainer yesterday, that is when we know that the stigma really has started to ease and we feel more comfortable sharing about both our mental and physical health. And that's a holistic approach because we don't operate in silos. Our bodies, we learn about our body systems in school or in healthcare professions in terms of systems. We learn about the brain, or we learn about the kidneys, or we learn about the lungs. But all of those things operate together, and it creates this holistic health that we don't often talk about because we don't use that kind of language sometimes. And I like to tell students when I teach them in nursing school, if we have a physical issue, if we have a physical ailment, then we're going to have mental health effects. And if we have a mental health condition, or an exacerbation of a mental health challenge, then we're going to have physical symptoms. And that makes perfect sense, but we often don't think about it in that way. So mental illnesses are things that are, involving our emotions, our thinking, our behavior. But I also want to make mention that there are true physiological reasons and chemical and hormonal reasons for having mental health challenges as well. And so it's important not to overlook that. If you have a heart condition, you're most likely going to experience anxiety. And that anxiety is going to be a physiologically induced anxiety that your typical treatment for a situational or psychological anxiety isn't going to help. And so it's important to create that awareness in ourselves and in others. So 1 in 4 or 1 in 5, depending on the statistics, you'll see adults experience mental illness. And so they'll have a mental health diagnosis. So there are a couple of different, statistical approaches you can look at that. So as many as 1 in 4 or 1 in 5. So in a room full of people, that's going to be a significant number of people who have a mental health illness or diagnosis or challenge. And that's going to be something that is considered mild, like mild depression or anxiety, something along those lines. But 1 in 25 in America, in terms of adults, have a serious mental illness. And that's going to be something like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or a personality disorder. And so just looking at these numbers, you can tell that there are many, many people who are facing these types of mental health challenges, and we need to be aware of that in ourselves and in others. So some common mental health conditions that we see everything from depression and anxiety and stress to PTSD or trauma, grief, which we don't often think about as being a mental health condition, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, personality disorders, phobias, which are, those fears that we have, the irrational fears that we sometimes struggle with. And then, of course, alcohol and substance use can be a part of a mental health condition. And so I hope that that kind of lays the groundwork for what we're going to talk about next. With mental health factors, there are many things that influence our mental health. So we can have hereditary factors or those genetic factors. And that would be something like having a shortage of serotonin receptors. So kind of that feel-good hormone, you have to have receptors for our neurotransmitters, or those chemicals that control some of those emotions and our levels of energy and that sort of thing. And so if we don't have enough receptors, then it doesn't matter how much hormone we have, we're not going to have enough places for that hormone to attach in our brains. And so we're naturally going to have a lower mood. That's one example. Environmental or situational factors. That could be something like, it could be a good stressor like getting married or graduating, or it could be something like a death or divorce. Physical factors could be, any kind of trauma or injury or tumor or something like a heart condition, like I mentioned, that could cause a physiological anxiety. Or we can have traumatic experiences, and those can be little t traumas, or those could be big T traumas. So it could be a trauma that, a big T trauma would be like a really bad wreck that you had. It was a one-time wreck, but it caused some life-changing events. And it was a big T trauma, but it only happened once and then it was over. You're just managing the after effects. Or it can be little T traumas where, particularly during childhood, you have, traumatic events, and it's the combination of all of those events that really the accumulation maybe of those events that's causing the lasting trauma. And all of these things, these 4 different factors, play a role in our mental health overall. Of course, particularly for women, you could have situations with hormones changing. Men's hormones, will change too. But when we think about women as an example, after pregnancy, after birth, during menopause, those are times where your hormones are going to change, and you could have some situational mental health challenges from that. Sleep deprivation, if you're, young parents, or maybe you're getting older and your sleep patterns are changing, that can cause some stress. So just remember that this is going to be something that's very fluid and dynamic, and that it's going to change throughout your lifespan, depending on a number of things that are sometimes beyond our control. So there's lots of ways that you can touch base and get some mental health care. You can have a psychiatrist, a psychologist. You can use counselors or therapists or health and life coaches. All of these folks are trained to help in specific parts of our mental health care. So with a psychiatrist, those are going to be the people that prescribe medication for us. Psychologists are usually clinical psychologists that see patients. They typically can't prescribe medications, but they can do some more advanced therapies than maybe a counselor or a therapist can. Counselors and therapists are usually going to be trained in things like cognitive behavioral therapy or talk therapy, where they really walk you through different mechanisms and approaches for addressing the stressors in mental health that you have, the challenges that come up with mental health. And those could be people like licensed counselors, marriage and family therapists, or even social workers. Some social workers have that as part of their practice, and that's within their scope. And then you can have health and life coaches who may or may not be certified. And so there are all of these possibilities of reaching out for help. And certainly I would typically say to reach out to your medical doctor to make sure that there's not an underlying physical root cause, and then ask for their input. It could be a medical doctor, it could be a physician's associate or a nurse practitioner. Whoever your primary healthcare provider is would be a great starting point. And then typically they're going to send you out for a referral to a counselor or a therapist. But here with our insurance at UA, you also can just simply make a phone call and go ahead and set up a counseling appointment if you feel like that's needed. So lots of different options for reaching out for mental health care. So despite healthcare having all of these different avenues for treatment, we really do have a prevalence of mental health disorders, but a profound shortage of psychiatrists and advanced practitioners. So more than half of the US has a shortage in terms of having a psychiatrist in the county. And so that can be really detrimental. We're very fortunate in Tuscaloosa for that not to be the case, although it is more of an issue for pediatric or juvenile populations. But there are 111 million people approximately in the US who are really in shortage of a mental health professional. And so it's important to know about that because, we are very fortunate in our area to not experience that level of shortage. So, along with creating awareness, challenging negative beliefs that you have about mental health and its treatment, I think is the first thing that you have to do if you're thinking that you need some professional, care. But we're also going to talk about things that we can practically do to cultivate mental well-being. So, of course, seek, immediate medical care for any mental health challenges that you feel like are severe. You are seeing more isolation and loneliness being reported due to COVID-19 over the last 2 years. We've had increased prevalence of depression, anxiety, stress, and suicide, unfortunately, particularly for certain populations, people who are vulnerable like healthcare professionals, people who may have other social or psychosocial vulnerabilities, populations that have less access to care. So there are severely vulnerable folks, particularly our older people who are isolated. But more and more, we're seeing younger people, so adolescents, teens, young adults, have some of those same challenges and are feeling really isolated and are feeling like their world is being impacted. So it's important to check on everyone right now, but most importantly, yourself. So pursuing a positive mindset is part of that. And we're going to talk about what that looks like. For a long time, and I think it's still something we see and hear a lot, we just say, good vibes only, or we say, just think positive thoughts. And I don't know about y'all, but when someone tells me to think positively or just relax if I'm stressed, that is not helpful to me at all. It actually makes me feel more anxious or more stressed. So we're going to talk about the practical side of what that means. And then developing a mental health wellness plan that really is about mental and physical health and practicing self-care and stress management. And what I want to say about self-care, and I talk about this later in the presentation, we aren't going to use self-care as a band-aid solution. For a lot of people, we talk about self-care and we think about, chocolate and, soaks in the tub and bath bombs and maybe we think about drinks with friends or, just different things like that. And those can all be great in moderation and can be something that are treats for you. But we don't want to use self-care as a band-aid. If our life feels overwhelming and out of control on a regular basis to the point that it's impacting your mental and your physical health, then we don't want to band-aid solution that with a bath bomb and chocolate, on Friday night. We really want to think about changing our day-to-day life and routines that are going to support, a healthy lifestyle for you. And so we don't want to try to escape that with self-care, although self-care is very important. So, and that's a part of a good stress management strategy, which we're going to talk more about as well. So the role of stress. Before we get to the practical solutions, we're going to talk about what stress is. You all know it. You all know when you feel stressed. It's that feeling. I always describe this to my students as that feeling when you have to slam on the brakes to keep from hitting someone in front of you, and that flood of hormones that you feel. Your heart starts racing. You might get a little sweating. Your mind starts racing and gets really active. You feel like your blood pressure's up, everything just feels, on edge. That is our body's stress response to any kind of physical or mental demand that we place on it. And that's adrenaline, that's cortisol, that's all of those hormones that start to get activated when we activate our sympathetic nervous system to respond to the stressor. And so it's actually a good thing. It's our body's way of actually preparing to respond to the stressor. But instead of it being this, prehistoric example of the saber-toothed tiger, which is what we always hear, our response is to fight or flight, when we have this saber-toothed tiger in prehistoric days. But unfortunately, our response has not really changed in that time from prehistoric days to now. And every time we hear a ding or a bell or a whistle on our phone, we get a notification. Every time we pop up our email, or we have something due at work, or our kids have something, if you're parents, whatever it is, there's so many different saber-tooth tigers now, and we have those 24/7, and we don't get the response. And then the rest that comes after the response, like you did in prehistoric days, you continue to stay activated and on 24/7, 365 days, because we don't ever get the actual break of, we responded to the stressor, we fought it, or we were fleeing, and now we're the tiger's gone and we're going to rest and get back to our reset. We don't ever get that break anymore, and so we're staying constantly overwhelmed. And sometimes we also freeze. So I think sometimes we think of, there's two responses. There are actually about 9 or 10 different responses to stress that we can have. The most typical are fight or flight. And so that's what we talk about most. But we also freeze. And I personally think that we freeze more than we think we do. I think it's really common, especially for people who are high achievers, people who are really bright, and people who think a lot, which I would imagine are probably all of you on this call. If you're really intentional about this type of wellness program, you're probably really intentional about other things in your life. So that overthinking can give way to a freeze response, where we just feel paralyzed or we feel stuck. If you hear yourself saying, I just feel stuck, or I just don't know what to do, you're probably in freeze response to the stressor you're having. And so the way to get unstuck in your freeze response is to take action. And if you overthink, or if you have decision fatigue, or if you just feel overwhelmed, that can be one of the hardest things to do, because you'll say, oh my goodness, okay, that's great, I need to take action, but what do I do first? And we can get stuck in that over analysis rather than just taking action. So I want you to think about just taking the next right step, and we'll talk more about that. So all stress isn't bad. We moralize everything in our culture. It's either good or bad. It's either right or wrong. And so I want you to think about stress in a more neutral term. I want you to think about stress as being necessary, or even just neutral. And so, stress is necessary, because we know from research and just the human experience that moderate levels of stress may actually help improve our performance and efficiency. Because if you're not stressed, then you're probably not going to prepare well for that project at work. If you're not stressed, you're probably not going to feel motivated to, get onto your to-do list, or like I'll tell my students, if you're not a little bit stressed about your test, you're probably not going to study for it. So you need some moderate levels of stress. Too little stress is going to result in being bored. We've probably all felt that. And too much stress is going to result in being unproductive, because you just feel paralyzed. And so I want you to think about where your stress levels are, and how often you feel like you're going from boredom to an unproductive level of stress. So negative effects, y'all know these, but there's physical and there's mental and emotional stressors and effects of those. And so you can have anything from, weight loss and hair loss, to heart palpitations and high blood pressure, which is what we most commonly see. And then you can certainly have mood swings and anxiety and depression, and you can use unhealthy coping mechanisms. We listed, alcohol and drugs here, but I would say it's getting, Cokes on the way home, and carbs and cakes and cookies and all of those things as well, because our body naturally knows to do those things to increase our dopamine and serotonin, and that's going to raise our neurotransmitters, and it's going to actually help in an actual physiological way, to alleviate some of the stress that we're feeling. So when we have stress, our B vitamins are going to be the first things that are depleted. So that's something that you want to consider. When you're stressed, you're going to deplete your adrenal reserves. You're going to deplete your dopamine. And so when you reach for that donut or that glass of wine, you are actually getting a little bit of a release of dopamine. And so you do feel better. And that's why some of these things can be so addictive, because your body naturally knows how to compensate, but you have to have the awareness of what you're doing and make good choices when you reach for something to help you cope. So going for a 30-minute walk, or grabbing a healthier version of a coffee drink, or calling a loved one, are also going to be ways that you can increase your dopamine, but it's just not the easy, quick solution that we sometimes look for. So identifying your stressors is an important step. You may feel stressed about everything in life right now, and that's okay. But think about the top 3 or 5 things that are stressing you out. Is it that you're always late? Is it that someone always can't find something clean to wear in the house? Is it that your email is constantly dinging in the background while you're trying to work on the computer? That's one for me for sure. I have to sometimes exit out of my email just to get a break. Is it that you're constantly running out of gas or groceries and you can't make it to the weekend? What are the things that are stressing you out? And if you have something to jot down, grab your phone and go to the notes app, or grab a scrap piece of paper and just write down those 3 to 5 things that are just weighing heavily on you right now. What are the things that you're kind of multitasking, stressing about while we're on this call? Write those things down. And then I want you to think about, what categories of stressors do you have? So it could be relationship challenges, mental or physical health. Maybe it's work demands and expectations, poor nutrition. That's probably for most of us. Financial, distress or insecurity, life changes. I think we've all had a lot of life changes the past 2 years. It could be time constraints in a fast-paced life, death and grieving, personal traumas. The list goes on and on. But look, we have the pandemic and political climate, the fact that we're always connected, social media, 24/7 news, decision fatigue is for certain one that I want to point out. The feeling of uncertainty, which has really, been something we've all faced lately. Comparison can really steal our joy. And then this kind of notion of hustle culture, where we feel like we always have to be striving for the next goal. That can be exhausting. So then when we think about our stressors and we think about the categories of stressors, we all have triggers for those stressors. So I like to give the example of dinner time. I have young children at home, and so 5 o'clock can be challenging because we're getting off work and we're trying to get kids to different activities and get food on the table for them. So if you know that dinner time is stressful, then think about the things that you can do. Maybe it's that you silence your phone. Maybe it's that you let the dog out in the backyard so that, there's not chaos while you're trying to cook dinner. It's those kind of things. Maybe if you know that something always gets spilled, or, something always falls in the kitchen while you're cooking dinner, go ahead and imagine what you're going to do in terms of a response. So for a while there, we have young children, and we have 2 sets of twins and an older daughter. So it's quite chaotic at dinner time, and inevitably someone would spill a plate of food, or knock something off the counter. And you can let that be a triggering moment where you want to yell or scream or just get frustrated. Or you can just go ahead and decide, okay, you know what, tonight at dinner, something might get dropped or spilled or broken, and that's okay. It's not, it's not life or death. It's just a thing that happens. And if this happens, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to count to 10. I'm going to go send a kid to help clean up. I'm going to take a break for a second, and then I'm going to come back. So that can be kind of a silly example, but y'all probably all have examples of how you want to respond. Maybe it's traffic in Tuscaloosa for y'all. Maybe you get really triggered about traffic on the way to and from work. Think about how you're going to respond, because you can get angry, and you can get frustrated, and you can kind of be in that bumper to bumper traffic and worried about being late, or just ready to be home because you're tired at the end of the day. But maybe you go ahead and decide, okay, I'm going to count to 10. I'm going to take some deep breaths. I'm going to listen to my favorite podcast, or I'm going to listen to my favorite music station, and I'm going to get my favorite coffee or, Coke or whatever it is, water, hopefully, most of the time to drive home. And I'm going to really enjoy that. And if I get stuck in traffic, that just means I get, a few more minutes of alone time and time with my music. Those are the kinds of ways that you can walk through your triggers. No, it's not pleasant having to clean up a mess at dinner time, and no, it's not pleasant being stuck in traffic, but there's always going to be things that you can do to make the situation better. It's also going to help you prevent, having those physiological effects of having high blood pressure and, heart rate going really haywire because you're stressed out about it. So if you can avoid your stressors and triggers, then by all means do so. But just know that it's not even, a goal or even kind of a practical thing to avoid all of those. So another thing that could be really helpful is developing a care plan and a support team. So when I was going through some challenges of my own a few years ago, and in combination with having young children, being in graduate school, working full time, and really needing to lose some weight just for my health and for my own comfort, I felt completely overwhelmed. And I'm a nurse and I do care plans for patients all of the time. I grade my students' care plans that they make for their patients that they're caring for. And while I was grading care plans, it was like a light bulb moment. It seems really silly now, but maybe you're like this too, where it just seems so obvious. If I can make care plans for other people, then I could make one for myself. And I don't know, that just felt really life-changing in the moment and something that sounded pretty obvious, but I didn't do that for a really long time. And so while you're doing a care plan for yourself, you can think about, what are the stressors? What are the triggers? How can I avoid them, or how can I lessen them, or how can I respond in a better way, a healthier way? Partner with your healthcare provider, whether that's your primary care provider, or maybe it's a mental health professional, or both. Maybe it's a nutritionist if you're struggling with your diet. Maybe it's a personal trainer if you're struggling with your exercise. Maybe it's a life coach if you're struggling with accountability. There's so many folks that you can reach out to, and you have access to a lot of those folks just by being an employee at UA. Some things that you can do in terms of self-care and stress management strategies. Once you've eliminated what you can eliminate from your schedule that's causing the stress, then think about things that are really fun. Maybe it's playing golf. Maybe it's going for a picnic. Maybe it's, maybe it is that bath bomb and chocolate on the weekend. Whatever it is for you, make sure that you're building those things into your everyday routines and your weekly routines. Make connections and build relationships at home and work. I always tell people it's really hard to dislike someone that you get to know. And so if you have, a relationship or a connection that you need to work on, try to get to know that person. Try to get to know what they like, what they dislike. Get to know their life story. So many of us have a story that we don't share, and most people would really enjoy sharing and having the opportunity to build that kind of relationship. So if there's someone that is more difficult for you to work with or get along with, maybe reach out to them and schedule time for coffee, or schedule time for a lunch, or maybe you just take a lap around your building together. Get to know them, work on a project together. Obviously, you can do all of this with, COVID, safety in mind, but do what feels comfortable for you. Having those relationships and connections at home and work are going to be really helpful to you. Ask for help as often as you need it, and as soon as you know you need it. A lot of times we tend to be the helpers, and so we don't like to ask people for help. I for sure feel that way. Nursing people, students, nurses, nursing educators, we are some of the probably most often people who don't want to ask for help, because we consider ourselves to be really good helpers. So we have to kind of talk to ourselves and give ourselves a pep talk of like, it's okay, I need help sometimes too. And then together, let's normalize talking about and caring for our mental health. So now we're going to talk about some practical strategies. And I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because you're going to have access to these. There is one slide that I'll point out that I added. So I'm going to tell y'all so you can do a quick screenshot. So grab your phone or use the snip feature on your computer if you can, because it's going to have a couple of things that you may want to reference. So when we think about stress, remember, it's just the mental and physical demands on yourself because you lack some tools or resources. So don't think about stress as being something that you can't manage. Think about it as, I just need a tool or a resource that would help me manage this better. And so this is what this section is all about. So I told you mindset is important, and Carol DeWick is a clinical psychologist and has done most of her work on mindset. She has this TED Talk. It's about 10 minutes long. It's really, really good, and it's on mindset. Highly would encourage you to watch this when you have a few minutes. Maybe put that on your schedule this week and see what you can learn from her, because she has some great work that really speaks to how we practically develop a better mindset, a healthier mindset. She also has a book and many other resources online. So explore her work. I think that'll be a great starting point for y'all. If stress is something that you know that you struggle with, definitely watch this TED Talk. It's called How to Make Stress Your Friend, and it's by Kelly McGonigal. And she is also a clinical psychologist that specializes in well-being. And this is about 15 minutes long, and it talks about the common misconceptions that we have around stress, and that our mindset around how we view stress is actually more impactful than the level of stress that we have. So love this TED Talk and share it with anyone that I encounter that has a stressful life or is going through some things that really create extra stressors, because it will change your mindset about stress. When we think about stress relief strategies, some things that you can think about, body relaxation techniques, breathing techniques, which I'm going to talk about, guided imagery. So, closing your eyes and imagining your happy place. So for me, that would be putting on some beach music, maybe ocean sounds on Spotify, and closing my eyes and imagining my favorite beach and imagining hearing the waves and seeing the ocean rise and fall, and hearing the sounds and smelling the salt air and the salt water and all of those things. Like, really make it a sensory experience where it's all of your senses being engaged in your happy place. That can really reset and refocus you. For breathing techniques, there are so many out there. You can Google these. It's called box, B-O-X breathing, or diaphragmatic breathing. There's others that you can reference as well, but box breathing is just you inhale through your nose for 4 seconds, you exhale through your mouth for 4 seconds, inhale through your nose for 4 seconds, exhale out your mouth for 4 seconds. And that will help activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for calming you down. So when you hit the brakes to avoid the person in front of you, when you're driving in your car, your sympathetic nervous system activates and gets you ready to respond to that stressor. So to cut that sympathetic nervous system off, you've got to take action. And one way that you can do it is those breathing exercises. So that breathing exercise is going to reset your autonomic nervous system, and it's going to activate your parasympathetic nervous system and tell you that it's okay, you can breathe now, you're good. And then once you do that, you can do some guided imagery, and that should reset everything in about 15 or 20 minutes. So give yourself, a few minutes to recover. If you do have a big stressor like that. Physical exercise, our bodies are meant to move. It is not necessary that you have a fancy gym membership or that you, do these high intensity interval or HIIT workouts or CrossFit. That can cause a lot of stress on your body. I have done those, and I think that they're great for some people at some times, but it's not something that I think everyone should do all of the time, because it's just a lot of stress on your body. Physical exercise really is the way to close the stress feedback loop. So if you're feeling stressed, the best thing that you can do is get up from where you're sitting and go do something. Walk, do some squats, make a phone call, get up while you're doing that. Do those kinds of things because your body is going to move. And when your body moves, it's going to get rid of those extra stress hormones that got released when you were feeling anxious or stressed. Have a good workout routine. Y'all, for most people, if you have not started a workout routine before and you want to start doing something every day, most people think cardio. And I think cardio is great to start with if you're going to do some simple walks, 5, 10, 15, maybe 30-minute walks daily. Perfect. But don't start these like really intense cardio workouts. You're not going to want to go do a hip hop class. That's really intense cardio. You're not going to want to go do HIIT or CrossFit because, again, really intense cardio. You've got to build up your strength and stamina. So doing some light workouts with strength training is the best way to start to be able to build up your stamina and your muscles to be able to actually do that good cardio workout. And we do need cardio workouts because that's going to give us good heart health. We don't think about cardio as about the heart, but it's cardiovascular. So it's a cardiovascular workout for your body. So definitely think about strength training and light walking to start. And then get approval first before starting anything with your healthcare provider because you want to make sure that you have a good baseline. Meditation is so important. I tell people all the time, meditation is for the mind what sleep is for the body. We don't want to just hit, the alarm clock snooze and wake up, for the day and then be go, go, go all night until it's time to go to bed. That's why so many people have sleep problems. We really need to start building in 5, 10, 15 minutes, 2 to 3 times a day. So maybe 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon, and 15 minutes in the evening to meditate. That could be, prayer or journaling. That could be listening to music. That could be meditation like you see pictured here. That could be just closing your eyes and shutting everything else down for a few minutes. It looks like a lot of different things. It doesn't have to just be the traditional, meditation. You could also use an app to help you. Lots of different options, but you want to just make sure that you're doing something to give your brain a break. Counseling, of course, we've talked about, and it can be really great because sometimes you just need that outside perspective and that external accountability to be able to take care of yourselves. So benefits, we all know the benefits of stress management, but I just want to really think about, how can we focus on improving and just 1% every day. So not reaching for perfection, not having to have all the check boxes marked on this perfect care plan, but how can we really focus on just improving, day to day, comparing your progress to your progress tomorrow, not comparing it to others. And then that your physical and mental health is going to improve. You're going to have more energy. You're going to feel more hopeful and more positive. And you'll be able to start learning and achieving and doing the things you've always wanted to do because you've just got more bandwidth to do that. So changing your perception and your expectations can help in managing stress. So many of us are perfectionistic and we feel like we have to be perfect. We sometimes think that jobs and tasks are, something that we can do in just a few minutes, but really, sometimes our to-do lists are more like mini projects. So make sure that it's reasonable, that we have SMART goals that are, specific, that they're measurable, that they're attainable, that they're realistic, and that, we can really achieve them. You want to make sure that they're timely, and you certainly want to try to avoid procrastination. But again, procrastination is something that is a part of the human experience. And so a lot of times perfectionistic people will procrastinate because it's a sign of coping. So you can cope by not doing something. So if you have a big project at work and it's stressing you out, then, procrastinating it is kind of delaying the pain of that stress. And so it's really a maladaptive coping mechanism. We often talk about people who procrastinate as being lazy, but I think we have more people who are high achievers and perfectionists who are procrastinating than people who are quote unquote lazy. So we really want to kind of avoid that mindset. Setting good boundaries, knowing when to say yes or no. Y'all, have a committee of no, people that you can reach out to, that when you have to make a decision, you can bounce ideas off of them. Anytime you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And so make sure that you're focusing on your best yeses. What's going to move the needle forward in terms of getting you where you want to be with your stress, with your goals, with your home and your work life? What is the best yes for you? Don't compromise on your values and beliefs, but to not compromise, you have to know what those are. So, look at what is important to you. Look at what you're passionate about. Those are going to be the things that tell you what your beliefs and your values are. Schedule time for yourself. Make an appointment with yourself. So, you wouldn't cancel on a friend to go to the coffee shop, or you wouldn't cancel on a friend to have a meeting with them, but we sometimes cancel on ourselves. So make sure that we're not doing that. Make sure you schedule your me time, put it in your calendar, really assign it a date and time. And then if a conflict comes up, you can genuinely say, I'm so sorry, I can't make that. I have an appointment. Listen to music, get outside in nature. That is so important. We are meant to be outside and we don't spend nearly enough time there. We typically only get outside when we're going to point A to point B, and we need much more outdoor time to really reset and re-energize. Maybe find a hobby or rediscover a hobby, something that's going to make you feel, joyful and playful and have some fun in your life, something to look forward to. There's some coping strategies here. Again, since you're going to have access to these, I'm not going to read through all of them. And many of these I put over and over again when I talk about these ways to combat stress, because I think it's important for you to hear them over and over. Maybe it'll stick, the more exposure, the more we hear the importance of it, the more likely we are to try it. So this is meant to be a checklist that you can print out and just put a check mark. I've tried this, it worked great. If it didn't work for you, try something else. So treat all of this information like a menu that, I'm going to try this and I'm going to try a little of that and I'm going to see what works. And that's the best advice I can give you, because you don't want to overwhelm yourself with trying to implement too many things at one time. Here's another page of coping strategies. Again, it's so important to just be engaged and present. I love this image over here on the right of the PowerPoint with, what I call hustle shoes. You've got your hustle shoes on, but you're still taking time to enjoy nature and to kind of rest. And there's a saying that I like to reference a lot of be present where your feet are. And so I always have to kind of remember that when I'm getting overwhelmed or thinking too far into the future, or, revisiting the past too much. I'm not in the future, I'm not in the past. My feet are right here, right now with y'all. And that's what I need to be focused on. And if we do that in a really positive way, in a non-shaming way, that can help recenter our focus and say, you know what, I'm not in, the afternoon hours. I'm right here, and this is what I'm facing. And most of the time when we're stressed, we're worried about a future outcome, or if we're anxious, we're worried about a future outcome. And so telling yourself that you're safe and that everything's fine right now is a good way to make your brain feel comfortable and to help you feel safe in the moment so that you can work through whatever challenge you're having. I think it's so important to get things on paper. Our brains are not designed to store all of the things that we store. We just do not have the capacity for that, but we think we do. And so reflect, journal, practice gratitude, do a regular brain drain, write things down, keep track of your progress, take pictures if it's something that you can track with a picture, write notes if it's something that you can track that way. And then just celebrate your tiny victories all along the way. Don't wait for big life milestones. Don't wait for, big events to celebrate. Really celebrate the small things, because that's going to enter, all of the joy and kind of interject all of the little happies that you have in your life, versus waiting for graduation. I'll tell my students, don't wait for graduation to be excited. Celebrate midterms, or celebrate your finals, or celebrate that you passed validation. We all have those kind of milestones in our lives. It looks different for us, now that we're probably post school. Some of us may still be in graduate school, but we still have those milestones. It's just those milestones get further and further apart the older we get. And so we really have to be intentional. We have to be more intentional than even the students here on campus, because we have those bigger gaps and we can get really discouraged if we don't build in our own celebrations. I always like to tell people about the wellness basics. These are the things that you need to do every day. You're not going to get out of overwhelm. You're not going to get out of feeling stuck or having mental health challenges or physical health challenges if you're not sleeping well, if you're not staying hydrated, if you're not eating a healthy diet, if you're not moving your body every day and you're not meditating. You're not going to get out of that feeling of overwhelm. So I'm going to move through these again because y'all are going to have access, but just think about ways that you can implement good sleep habits, good hydration, a healthy plate, exercise, mindfulness, and meditation. These are some things that you can try for sure that are just examples. Be really intentional with your social media, your entertainment, your gaming, your TV watching, all of those things, your emails, having all of that on and active in the evenings. I read a study last night that said we spend an average, if you watch about 3 hours of TV a day, the American adult spends about 9 years watching TV over their lifetime. And so I love TV. I don't watch 3 hours of TV a night, but I do watch TV. And I was thinking, I don't know that I want to say that I've spent nearly a decade of my life watching TV, though. And so think about what you could do in a decade's time if we were more mindful of that. And I'm speaking to myself here on that one too. Be really mindful of how you cope. We like to self-medicate sometimes. So I always like to mention, we've seen that, especially with wine and beers and alcohol, that consumption has gone up during the pandemic. And so we just want to make sure that we're not numbing out to our emotions. If this is something that you struggle with, there's certainly resources and help. I would also recommend watching Brene Brown's TED Talk, Vulnerability. It's a great one, and it talks a lot about some of the things we've mentioned today. And then my friend Julia Madrid is a licensed counselor here in Tuscaloosa, and she likes to share with her clients this principle of on the horizon, or the 2-2-2 rule. So every 2 weeks, go out for the evening, every 2 months, go out for a weekend, and every 2 years, go out for a week. And so it just talks about, really scheduling things to look forward to, things to have on your calendar to really anticipate. And we operate best when we have something to look forward to. That's why we love milestones and holidays and celebrations. And so this is building that into our schedule. And I would say a more practical approach to this is that every quarter, so every 3 or 4 months, have something on your calendar to look forward to. Maybe it's a lunch date, maybe it's a museum tour, maybe it's an athletic event or something like that. Maybe it's a little vacation, to the beach. We're close to the beach or close to the mountains. We're very fortunate in that. So maybe it's something like that. It doesn't have to cost a lot. It doesn't have to involve anyone else, although it can. And just it has to be something that you're joyful about. And then this is the recap that I wanted to mention. So I put a camera here just to kind of say, here's a recap of the things that you can do to take action. Control what you can control. Assess your environment. If your car, your desk, your computer, your phone, your house, apartment, if it's cluttered and chaotic, your mind is going to be cluttered and chaotic. It's a symbiotic relationship. So tidy your space. Make time for things that you enjoy. Prepare the night before. Get a good routine in place. Schedule everything, even the fun stuff, date nights and friend nights and Bible study and, group bunko or whatever it is you do, golf, whatever is joyful for you. Schedule it, assign it a time and a date, and put it in your calendar. Because if you don't schedule it, it probably isn't going to get done. Make appointments with yourself and keep them. Build in margin into your day. Don't run from one thing to the next. That's going to exhaust you. Think about some things that are outstanding that you haven't gotten to do. Like maybe you need to make a phone call, but you just have been procrastinating it. Maybe you've got a home project that you need to finish. Do those things. We have a wonderful labyrinth here at the university at the CCN building. So come over to the College of Nursing and walk the labyrinth. If you don't know what I'm talking about, do a quick Google search, and it's a walking meditation that you can do, and it's in the pavement right outside, and you can walk that. There's instructions on the sign where you walk, and it's a great way to reset and recenter. Again, there's so many great things here. I want to tell you quickly before we move on to the next slide, practicing what's called the coaching model. It's where we think about our circumstances, our thoughts, our feelings, our actions, and our results. Our circumstance might be that we're really overwhelmed and we're trying to work and parent and do all of the things in the middle of a pandemic. And when we say that, our thought is that, wow, that's really hard. And then our feeling is that we feel overwhelmed. And so the action is that we don't do anything because we just feel overwhelmed and stuck. We have that freeze response. And then the result is that life is hard because we don't do anything, right? We're just overwhelmed. So I want you to think about, in this coaching model, the circumstance doesn't change, but your approach and mindset about the circumstance changes. So yes, you're still trying to do all of the things during a pandemic, but if you have the thought that instead of it stressful and I can't do this, if you reorient yourself and say, you know what, this is hard and I am stressed, but I'm capable and I can change things if I want to. I have control. I'm going to control what I can control. When you say that out loud, you automatically feel a little more hopeful and encouraged, and you start to change because your feeling is that you're more optimistic and more hopeful. And so you feel more inspired to take action, and that action is going to lead to a more positive result. Okay. So I want you to think about that. Invest in yourself, invest in your personal development. That doesn't have to be money, that can be time. Practice compassion for yourself and others. Parent that inner child that gets a little bit rambunctious when we neglect it. We all have an inner child that we need to parent. Play. I like to tell people, be a little more silly than serious sometimes. And then always ask for help. These are some other useful resources as we close, some grounding techniques, some apps, my favorite totally stress-free Spotify playlist, my favorite yoga channel. So these are some great resources here, Headspace and Motivation app, and then the feet on the grass is just a reminder to get out in nature. Grounding, putting your feet to grass or the beach or salt water lets you get more electrons in your body that starts to really eliminate and balance out those free radicals. And you can definitely increase your energy in a natural way. There's lots of other ways to do it, but that's pretty easy. Here's a poem about peonies growing through the dirt. It's really important that we remember that our resilience is really cultivated through struggle. And so to grow our resilience muscle, it really is going to require us to do the good work of growing through the challenges that we have. So I wanted to leave y'all with that. And then remember that finding balance looks different for everyone. So these are stacked stones called cairns, and they're beautiful and they're art forms. But what I want you to see is that each rock is different. Each group of rocks are stacked in balance with one another, but it all looks different. And just remember not to compare yourself to your neighbor, because we all have a different journey, and we're all going to have to do different things to get to our end goals. So we'd love for you to follow us on our social media channels. Miranda and Ashley do a wonderful job of maintaining those for the Wellness and Work Life office. And we would love for you to take, some really great opportunities to join us in our upcoming health screenings and programmings. All of that can be found at wellness.ua.edu. So please feel free to join us in those. And then would love to take some questions. I know we're going to be at time, but I will stay. For those of you that need to go, you're going to get your credit for attending today, but we will definitely stay and make sure that your questions get answered. I also am available for free health and life coaching. It's a benefit of your employment here, so you're welcome to email me if that's something that you would like to ask about. So I'm going to go to the chat and see what questions we have. All right. Lots of hellos. Thank you. Yes, the presentation is in the chat. And let's see. Lots of hellos. All right. Stress depleting B vitamins is something I haven't heard of before. Can you tell us more about that? So yeah, so a lot of us have a B vitamin deficiency and vitamin D and all of our vitamins really, because it's depleted in our food sources in the soil that we have. And so absolutely, if you have a vitamin B deficiency, you probably have some gut health issues going on, and it's likely that stress is causing some of that. So definitely work with your healthcare provider and a nutritionist if you need more support. But doing some good things to heal your gut and making sure that you are eating well, that you're de-stressing, those are all going to be things that you want to do. Okay, let's see what else. Yes, thanks for linking the TED Talks, Miranda. Awesome. Glad you like the 222 rule. Good. Absolutely. And I will post my email. It looks like that's a question. That is my email if anyone wants to email me. Thanks for the thank yous. Awesome. Working my way through. Y'all had a lot of questions and comments. Good. All right. Are there any others that I could answer for y'all? I'm happy to do so. Feel free to go if you need to. I know it's a busy day, but happy to stay and answer. Yes. Thanks, Lucy. Give everyone just a minute in case you're typing. All right. Well, let's see. Oh, thanks. I'm so glad y'all know Julia. She's been a good friend and colleague. Thank you. All right. Well, seeing none, we'll go ahead and wrap it for today. I hope you'll have a great day. Remember, just choose one thing to work on. And mindset's where I would start, but maybe mindset and a wellness basic. And I always say hydration is one of the best things that you can do first because you have the most control over it. Some of the other things like eating and sleep, there isn't as much control, but water is where you could start. Mindset would be another great one. And then just pick a few things to make some changes and see what works for you. Reach out if y'all need anything at all. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks so much.